When I was 5 or 6, I was completely obsessed with the children's TV show Sesame Street. Any merchandise they had, I had it. This was back in the 90s, so VHS tapes were still really big. And this is where my story starts. As I said, I loved Sesame Street, so my parents got me whatever had to do with the show. I was spoiled being an only child and all. One day my mom came in with this big blue tote full of Sesame Street VHS tapes. And I was so elated. As soon as I put the box in my room, I automatically started to shove them in. And was in front of my TV. This was when televisions had the big box on the back and a VHS player built in them where you can record on an empty VHS. Anyways, I watched episode after episode, laughing at Grover's hijinks as he played as his alter ego, Super Grover. It was supper time and my mom called me downstairs to eat. She asked me, "You like your Sesame Streets?" "Yeah, they're great, thanks Mom," I replied, smiling with every word. After supper I ran back upstairs and just realized I had only 3 more episodes left. So I grabbed the next one, but something about it was off. The sides were rough as if it was scraped and the title card wasn't even the show's insignia. It was written in black Sharpie marker. The title was Sesame Street, unaired episode. Well, my little heart jumped with joy. I thought it was cool. I was going to be able to see an episode no one else had seen. I felt like I was special. Like I had found gold. Boy, was I wrong. I took out the last VHS tape out of the TV and put the other one in. It started to play The Sunny Days, but it was slowed to a growl. And I noticed none of the normal characters weren't present, but the kids were. The children's faces were distorted and twisted. I shook it off as nothing because sometimes VHS tapes would glitch because of dust or a wrinkle. The episode's title then popped up, which I thought was a joke. The title was Murder at Sesame Street. I kinda chuckled, cause I've always had a weird sense of humor. Then the episode began to play. The first sketch was Elmo, but something was off. His eyes were straight black and his red fur had traces of dirt. He was in his house, but even the crudely drawn house was off. The house looked as if it was drawn on cardboard rather than the normal 90s revolutionary technology of the green screen. He seemed really agitated, as he usually gets. He was talking to himself, claiming, "Elmo tired of how other people treat him, Elmo can't handle it anymore, Elmo sick of Sesame Street," he said, but he looked directly at the camera, which made me uncomfortable. Because I noticed pupils had emerged a bright red. Then he asked, "Are you sick of Sesame Street too?" I didn't answer, as I never did, and he seemed to get more and more agitated as he said, "Exactly what Elmo means. Nobody listens, nobody cares what Elmo feels." Then he said the worst line as he slowly looked at the screen they're about to. He went to his kitchen and grabbed a knife and held it. He looked at the camera as if looking at me and started laughing. The next scene cuts to Bert and Ernie's house. Their house, like Elmo's, was run down and old-looking. Bert was eating porridge as he usually did. He looked almost normal. His skin was bright yellow, more than usual. And then there was a knock at the door. Bert slammed his spoon down and said in a very agitated tone, "Who can that be?" He gets up as Ernie walked out of the bathroom. He had bruises all over him. He asked Bert, "Who's at the door, Bert?" "I thought I told you to stay away from me," Bert said, and Ernie ran back into the bathroom. Sobs can be heard. Bert looked through his peephole and said, "It's Elmo, what does he want?" He opened the door and Elmo walked slowly in with the knife still in his hand. Bert asked, "What do you want, Elmo?" Very nastily looking at Elmo, "What are you doing with that knife?" Elmo started stabbing Bert in the chest. This scared me even more than what I already was. The blood looked oddly real with each slash. I could see traces of the actor's arm. Ernie looked out and screamed, "What are you doing, Elms?" Elmo looked up at him slowly and looked back down to Bert's now dead body. I noticed that Bert's eyes were black and red, exactly like Elmo's. And his skin was white as a ghost. Elmo started to slowly walk toward Bert. Bert, clearly terrified, started crying. And Elmo started to stab him too. As before, traces of the actor's arm were visible with gashes in them. Just like Bert. Ernie was dead with black and red eyes. Elmo then looked to the camera and laughed menacingly. The laugh seemed to go back and forth through the left and right speakers. By now, I had goosebumps all over. I began to cry. I was scared. But I was in a trance of sheer terror. The screen started to go to static and the scene changed to the count, but the background was a large pentagram. The count was looking at the camera for a few seconds in silence. Then in a deeper voice, he said my favorite number is 666. A light flicked and the pentagram went up in flames. I heard distant screams. These weren't regular screams. These were children's screams and cries and pleas. The cutscene was bat and the letter 6. It went on for at least a minute, then it went to Elmo. But he was with a bald man and the rest of the Sesame Street gang. They all had red eyes and they had pointy jagged teeth. The man was facing the camera, then turned around and said, "Very good Elmo, you enlightened everyone in Sesame Street." He asked the group, "Who are you?" They replied in a demonic unison, "We are Legion." They repeated this when the man turned and said, "We are all Legion." And they faded, their words still echoing, growing louder and slowly. The fire pentagram appeared again. Then the video stopped. I tried rewinding, but the tape snapped. As if someone purposely snipped it. Now that I'm older, I've searched for this episode. The only thing that popped up was an episode that the Satanic Church priest Anton LaVey once starred in Sesame Street back in the 80s. But parents put up petitions, so the show was never aired. So if anyone has any information on this episode, please be open.